What's going on, everybody? It's the Pumpkin King back again for another video. Last time I talked about the Tate-LaBianca murders and my opinion on why those murders happened. And my opinion is the drug theory, pretty much. I have a combination in my theory of the copycat killings plus the drug theory. I also believe that Helter Skelter did play a role in a small, very small role in why these people was killed. I don't believe that Charles Manson uh, implanted that theory in these people's minds when they killed these people. I felt like it was something of their interpretation. Like Charles Manson said before, he wasn't of that generation. He was a generation of the 50s. He grew up on Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra and things like that. And his music and his voice style reflects that what he said about that. But I think it's definitely something that they came up with, and I feel like that as warped as their mind was when these events took place, that was probably an undercurrent in their subconscious while these events were happening. I would definitely think the drug theory was the most prevalent in all of this. Tex Watson was a very big drug addict, and he was strung out during the murders, and who knows how long before that. But he was involved with a lot of people. He was involved with a lot of drug dealers and with a lot of people who were very prominent in Hollywood at the time. He actually lived behind Abigail Folger at one point in time, a while before the murders happened. So everybody was definitely connected in all these murders. The world is a very small place, and the more that you read and learn about the Tate-LaBianca murders, then the more you'll realize that. But Linda Kasabian was only at the ranch for a couple of months before the murders happened. And it's the first day that she came to the ranch. Let me back up. She came to the ranch. She met Catherine Gypsy Share through a friend by the last name of Melton. And she told her, Gypsy Share told Linda Kasabian about an idyllic place in L.A. where there was this guy named Charlie who was a very magical kind of guy. Those are my words, not hers. I'm not sure of her exact words or even the record of the words that she said. But she convinced her to come down there. And so she did. And it's the first day she was there, she hooked up with Tex. And they both reported that it was a very intense experience. And Linda Kasabian said that as soon as she saw Tex, she was very hot for him. There's only been one interview that I've seen, this video interview with Tex Watson, and all the things that I've read from him, he hasn't mentioned Linda Kasabian in that perspective. But I'm sure they had a thing going on. I know they did for a fact. And up until the murders, they were doing creepy crawlings and all this other criminal activity together. But not just Tex Watson and Linda Kasabian, but a lot of other people involved as well. But Linda Kasabian and Tex Watson had a thing, and they would go around and they were involved with a lot of dealings together. Like I said before, they were kind of like Romeo and Juliet, or not Romeo and Juliet, Bonnie and Clyde in a way, in their own vagabond kind of way. But Linda Kasabian said that she came to L.A. in search of God, and Vincent Bugliosi and all these Helter Skelter books and movies want to portray her as the paragon of a hippie, of a flower child. They say that and repeat that all the time, that she didn't have killing in her, she was cut from a different cloth, and that she wasn't made from the same DNA as Tex Watson and the others that actually killed those people. But she was there. She had involvements with Tex Watson. Susan Atkins and Tex Watson snorted speed before they went to the murders. That's what Susan Atkins said. And I'm sure Linda Kasabian was a part of that, considering that he was Tex's girlfriend pretty much, even though he had a bunch of them. But she was the only one to have a valid driver's license. Mary Bruner was arrested for something. I can't remember what she was arrested for, but she had a driver's license, and since she was locked up, Linda Kasabian was chosen, so they say, to drive the car. And she said that Charlie told her to go get a knife and a change of clothes and her driver's license and to do what Tex said. And she said that they drove up to Benedict Canyon to Cielo Drive. And that's what she said. But anyway, they were doing shady shit for a couple months and weeks before the murders happened, Tex and Linda. And there's no telling how widespread their dabbling with drugs has reached, how far it reached back then. Because I know from firsthand personal experience that when you immerse yourself in a drug addiction lifestyle or anything that has to do with that chaotic existence, that you are going to be dealing with people and places that you normally wouldn't, and you're going to be putting yourself in situations that are just out of this world. And I'm sure in the 60s in LA at a commune with a bunch of hippies that it was magnified times 10 with the chaos that ensued with all the dealings as far as drugs and criminal activity is concerned. But who knows what all they got into. She reported that she went to the house and that she shot Stephen Parent. Tex Watson shot Stephen Parent, and then they went in the house and she started crying and she was out, and Tex told her to stay outside by the car as a lookout in case anybody came. But I don't understand that either. Was it Stephen Parent's car that she was standing beside? Because it's reported that they parked the car on the road before you got to Cielo Drive to make it look like it was a residential car. And then they got out of the car and walked up Cielo Drive. And then he cut the phone lines. And then after the murders were committed, they left and they stopped to wash off and to get a drink of water at a neighbor's house that was parallel to the Tate-LaBianca house. So that's a very contradicting statement that's never really been discussed that I've always been interested in. What car were they talking about? There's just a lot of holes in everything about this, and everybody is lying. I'm 100% positive that everything that Linda Kasabian said on the stand during the trial was completely coerced by Vincent Bugliosi. He was going through a lot of things at the time himself, and he was under a lot of strain from a lot of important people to get a conviction in this trial because of the things that he was facing personally. And so he was willing to go to any length at all to make sure that he got that. And he did. And I'm sure he said he threatened to Linda Kasabian if she didn't do exactly what he wanted her to do, that he would try to take away her children or would prosecute her to the full long arm of his law, per se. But she complied with his wishes ultimately, and all we know is what she said pretty much. She was the star witness to all this for the prosecution in the trial, and it's reported that she was out there and she saw Wojtek Frykowski, that has been noted, run out the door, and then she said, "God, I'm sorry," and she started breaking down, and she said, "Please make it," she told Susan Atkins to please make it stop, and she said that it was too late, and that Linda Kasabian tried to make up some kind of lie and trying to say that somebody was coming, but there wasn't anyone. If she really didn't want the people to die, she could have done something. She said that she was going to steal the car. Since she was by it, but then again, the car was supposedly parked down the road, and it was a pretty steep hill, so I'm just not sure about all that. I definitely feel like she had more involvement than it was told. A lot of people were reported to say, and I don't understand how no one heard the gunshots. In the last couple of days, I've saw in videos where people have the same thought as me as to why no one heard a gunshot, and that's kind of mind-blowing that I've never read that before until now. But as I've heard before and heard people say, in the canyons where the house was located, noises could come from any direction. And I'm sure people wasn't accustomed to hearing a gunshot in the late 60s in the early morning hours. I mean, it's still pretty uncommon, even though gunshots happen all the time in LA, I'm sure. But still, they probably didn't even think it was a gunshot. They probably thought it was fireworks or something. Who knows? I hear gunshots all the time, but I am in the country and in the South, and people shoot all the time. But even if I was somewhere where I knew they wasn't supposed to be shooting, it wouldn't alarm me. So I can understand that. But I would like to know what Linda Kasabian did that night and what she saw. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall for the conversation that her and Patricia Krenwinkel and Susan Atkins and Tex had on the way to the house. I would like to know the conversation that she had with everyone about what she did as they were leaving and as they were throwing the clothes over the bank and all that kind of stuff. Because in a documentary, in the Manson documentary for the History Channel, when they did a theatrical replay of the events, they had Tex talking about he was mad and he was all jacked up and taking off his clothes while he was changing, going down the road, talking about how he was going to beat her later. And I know that probably wasn't said or didn't happen, but that got me to start thinking as to the full extent of their relationship and just exactly how far she was willing to go for him. We know that she was willing to go to in a certain extent for Manson. She thought that he was the devil at first, and she knew that he had some kind of powers because the first time they had sex, he said something about her having a father hang up. And so she liked to be the beneficiary to the mind games that were being played to her, even though it's not clear as to the mind games that Manson was playing, if he was playing any at all. I know if he was, it wasn't Helter Skelter. He probably was just trying to figure out some kind of scheme to have to do with dope and girls. I mean, if you have 30 girls running around that's willing to give it up for you and that's willing to do anything for you, are you going to give that up? Most likely not, especially when they can control all the men that come in and out that has the drugs and the money and the connections with everything. But the next night, they went to do the same thing. It's reported that Linda told Charlie that she's not like him, that she couldn't kill, but they went because she had a driver's license. They went and dropped her, Steve Clem Grogan, Leslie Van Houten, Patricia Krenwinkel, Susan Atkins, Charles Manson, and Tex Watson drove to Los Feliz over in Silver Lake to the LaBianca's house beside of Harold True, where they had went to parties before, and Manson and Watson got out of the car and went and tied Leno and Rosemary up, and they came back, and she said it's reported that Charlie told Leslie, Patricia, and Tex to go inside and finish it. And Linda Kasabian, Susan Atkins, and Stephen Grogan and Charles Manson went to Venice Beach because a couple of days before, Linda Kasabian had met a Lebanese actor, I believe, named Saladin Nadir, if I'm pronouncing that right. And but she knocked on the wrong door because she didn't want him to get hurt. And it's reported that Susan Atkins, Scott Michael said in his 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter documentary that Susan Atkins defecated on the stairway before they left and nobody was harmed, and that they went and dropped Rosemary LaBianca's wallet that Charles Manson had in a bathroom, the same gas station where James Dean took his last famous picture with his car before he died. And then they went to Denny's and they got milkshakes while the slaughter was ensuing miles away by the other three. But Linda Kasabian is definitely not a saint. She's definitely not the epitome of a perfect flower child of the 60s that you would think, or that you might want to smoke some grass with or take a few hits of acid with. I'm sure the violence and all the other brainwashing mantra that was consumed by the rest of them was done the same by her, and that she intook a lot of it, and that she participated a lot more than she let on, and that everybody else let on. Who knows why everybody is lying about everything? There's definitely a lot of mysterious things that are going on about this case, and that's what makes it so interesting. But I just wanted to point out that Linda Kasabian was not a saint. She definitely had a thing for Tex Watson, and who knows what she's doing now. But next video, we're going to be going through Sharon Tate and debunking some of the myths as to how much of a piece of perfection that she was as a person. Which I love Sharon Tate, and I wish that she didn't die like she did as well as the others, but she wasn't. So peace out, my friends.